Hello, I'm Jose with FrSky North America. Today's topic is the remote NFC switch. The NFC switch allows you to keep your batteries physically connected to your plane throughout your flying day and just turn it on and off via the NFC switch or your transmitter. First is by using this NFC key to turn on and off your receiver, and the second is to use your transmitter to turn on and off the receiver. Okay, a few notes. The NFC switch will work with receivers that have a 3-pin switch input like the TDR12, TDR18, or even with the RB units like the 35 and the 25. The NFC switch is ideal for gas, glow, and turbine planes. For electric flyers, it will not disconnect power to your ESC, only the receiver. So for electric planes, you still need to disconnect the battery lead in order to shut off the plane. So it really isn't ideal for electric planes. If you have other accessories like gear controllers that have their own batteries, again, the NFC switch will not control those devices unless you are powering them through your receiver. Pay particular attention to external devices like gear controllers. Some gear controllers have their own failsafe system. For example, JP gear controllers will either extend or retract the gear when it loses signal from the receiver. When running a gear controller, please do this test before setting up the remote NFC switch. Have your plane on a stand with the gear free to retract or deploy. Try disconnecting the receiver and see if the gear retract. If they do, you can reverse the 2-pin gear wires and they should deploy when you disconnect power to the receiver. This is the mode you want when running a remote receiver switch. You can now reverse your gear channel to have them operate the way you want. The other thing that you can do is power that gear controller or any other device through the receiver, and so that way everything will just turn off. Okay, so let's set up the NFC switch to operate with the NFC key. This is the mode that is default out of the package, so no real setup is necessary. Have your receiver registered and bound to your model file. And now let's go ahead and connect the NFC switch to the receiver. In this case, I have a TDR18. You use the wire that has 2 white connectors on it. One of the white connectors goes into the NFC switch, and the other side goes to the receiver. Be careful and make sure the polarity is right before you connect it. Okay, let's connect power to the receiver. Now, if we use the NFC switch, we can turn it off and we can turn it on. Telemetry recovered. The NFC switch will fail safe on. So let's go ahead and test that. If I disconnect power to the NFC switch, if I disconnect this connector, the receiver will turn on and stay on. Let's go ahead and hook it up again. Turn the power off. Telemetry lost. And disconnect the connector, and it turns on. Telemetry recovered. Okay, let's go ahead and hook it up again. So you can mount the NFC switch to the inside of the fuselage, and on the outside of the fuselage, if you know where that switch is, you can turn on and off the receiver through that. Telemetry lost. Telemetry recovered. Turning it off, and there's off. Telemetry lost. So that way you don't have to take the canopy off or open up a battery hatch to get to your NFC switch to turn it on and off. If for some reason the NFC switch does not work with the key, there are a couple things that we can try to do. First, the NFC switch may be set to turn on via the transmitter. In that case, we would need to rebind the NFC switch to wired mode. The other instance would be that the NFC key is not properly bound to the NFC switch. First, I'll show you how to set the NFC switch to wired mode. This is the default mode, so it should not be necessary with a new NFC switch. But for troubleshooting, here are the steps. So you have your NFC switch, and you have this other connector that has like a servo connector on one end and the multi-pin white connector on the other. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect this from your receiver and and now we'll hook it up to this connector. This connector will plug into your transmitter, and this is how you do programming mode. Up top, there is a servo-looking connector over there, and make sure that the yellow pin is towards the side with the notch. Hook that up. So in order to program the NFC switch, we're going to go into System, go over to Device Config, and you can touch Flight Safety, you can page, go down to Flight Safety, I'm going to page, and scroll down to the Remote NFC switch right there. Now, with this connected, you are in S-port connector mode. Go over here to Wireless, and if it always defaults off, but if you do see it off, switch it on and then turn it off again. And now you can hit Bind. Bind is okay. So now, because you made sure that the wireless was off, this NFC switch will now be in the key mode, using the key, and not the wireless mode, using the transmitter to turn on and off. So we could try that again and see if it works. But the other thing that you might need to do is the next option down is bind card. And what they mean by card, they're considering this to be the card or the NFC key. And so if this key somehow loses bind with the NFC switch, you might have to rebind it. I have never seen that happen, but it's nice that it's in there just in case something does go wrong. So go ahead and hit bind card. Please hold the NFC switch close to the NFC panel for binding. Okay, it says not successfully bound. Let's try that again. I probably waited too long. There it goes. NFC card, bind NFC card successfully. So now we are good. So the key is now bound to the switch, and also we made sure that the wireless mode was turned off. Once that happens, then you're not going to control it by the transmitter, but you will control that NFC switch and your receiver by this key. So I know it was working before, but let's go ahead and try it. I'm going to disconnect it and go ahead and reconnect it back up again to the receiver. Let's try it. Off.
Telemetry lost.
On.
Telemetry recovered.
Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is show you how to use your transmitter to turn on and off the NFC switch, which in turn turns on and off your receiver. And this will not require the switch anymore, so I can put that away. And we will need to go ahead and program this NFC switch to go into wireless mode. So again, I'm going to disconnect it from the receiver. Hook it up again to this wire that has a servo connector on it. Make sure that the yellow connector is going towards the notch. And what you do is let me get out of this menu, I'll go back into it, so that way we know how to do it. Get out of the menu. From the main menu, hit System or the gear icon. Scroll over to Device Config. Page, which is the center button down, 1 to the Flight Safety. Scroll across to the NFC switch. And over here, we want to turn on wireless mode. And we want to choose a channel that we want to turn on and off the receiver with. Now, You got to make sure that on your model that you're not going to use that channel for anything else, for example, gear or flaps. So make sure it's an actual free channel that you're not using for anything else. In this case, I'm going to choose channel 16. And then once wireless is on and the switch is set to channel 16, hit the bind button. And it says bind OK. So we are done. So this is now set up in wireless mode, and we assigned channel 16 to that. Disconnect it from the radio. Let's go ahead and reconnect it back up to the receiver. Now we have to go ahead and assign a switch to channel 16 to turn on and off the NFC. So I'm going to go into model, go to mixes, and this is just a basic model that I created. So let's go ahead and add a mix. We'll do a free mix, enter. Let's put it at the last position. And the source will be whatever switch you want to use to turn on and off the receiver. So might be kind of nice if you have, for example, if you have X20AW, you have a locking switch over here. That's nice because you don't want to just use any switch over here. But in this case, I'm going to pretend this is a locking switch, and afterwards I'll show you how I do it without that locking switch. So the source, we want to go ahead and enter over there, and now we want to choose the switch. In this case, it's SG switch. So we'll use that switch. If this was an AW, that would be a locking switch. And the output then is channel 16. The channel doesn't have a name. Do you want to copy the name?
Telemetry loss.
Sure. I don't think I created a name. Let's go ahead and create a name over here. Let's call it remote switch. Oops. So remote switch, there it goes. And then I chose channel 16 over there. And that should be it. So this switch will now turn on and off that receiver. There's on.
Telemetry recovered.
There's off. And that's it. It's that basic.
Telemetry loss.
On and off.
Telemetry recovered.
Okay, so let's say that you don't have an AW with that locking switch, which is awesome for remote turn off and turn on, and you want to do it a different way. One of the ways that I like to do it is to use the function switches down here at the bottom. And the function switches can be done in any mode. If I set this to momentary mode, then what I do is I have to hit this button and this button at the same time to activate the receiver. And then I add another layer of safety that I have to hit and hold it down for at least 1 second before it turns on or off that receiver. So we're going to go ahead and set that up. The first thing that you need to do is go over to Edit Model and make sure that your function switches are set to momentary mode. That's the mode that I love to use these function switches on. So maybe I can make this one a call out for my battery level. This one might be my GPS speed. And then these two buttons at the same time would be to turn on and off that receiver. So momentary mode is the mode that I love to use those function switches on. Okay, so once that's in a momentary mode, I'll get out of that, go into model, and then go over to logic switches. And I'm going to create a new logic switch. And this is the one that's going to combine this switch and this switch. So I'll go over here, let's name it, and this is function switch 4 and function switch 6. So I'm going to name it FS, I'm sorry, that's actually 3. 3 and if I can hit the keyboard right, FS 6. The function that I want is AND. So this logical switch will not work unless 2 conditions are met, which is FS3 and FS6. So AND, A-N-D, right there. The value 1 is going to be this switch, FS3, and value 2 will be this switch over here, FS6. So now if you look at the logical switch, the red LS1 up top, that tells you the status of this logic switch. So right now it is off. If I hit this button, does not turn on again, it does not turn green. Hit this button, it does not turn green. But if I hit and hold down both, then it does. So now that's done. I'll get out of that and I'll make a new one, which will be the actual remote switch. So let's add one. And this one, let's name it REM SW for remote switch. Did I get that right? I did. Okay. So I'm going to go over here to function, and this one I want sticky. And all a sticky is it'll stay on. So right now, you see how it's green? It stays on until the off trigger or the off condition is met. So the trigger on condition will be the logical switch we created before, which is FS3 and FS6. And the off condition trigger will be the same one. Logic switch, FS3 and FS6. Then I go delay before active of, say, 1 second or 2 seconds, whatever is comfortable for you, and a delay before inactive of at least 1 second as well. So this will make it so that I have to hold these down for at least a second. So now if you see the green LS2 up top, if I was to hit and hold down, it turns off. If I hit and hold down, it turns on. The great thing about logical switches is when you first turn on your radio, or if you go to this model file, the default for the logical switch will always be off. So you have to turn on the receiver with the button push before you do anything else. It'll always start in the off condition. So now all I need to do is take that remote switch and put it into that mix. So I'm going to get out of that, get out of that. I'm going to scroll back under models and go to mixes, go to that remote switch, edit it, and the source over here, instead of SG, let's make it a logic switch and make it the remote switch. So right now it's on.
Telemetry recovered.
And if I hit and hold down, it turns off.
Telemetry lost.
Hit and hold down for at least a second, then it turns on. There you go.
Telemetry recovered.
So what's nice about this is it's very hard to inadvertently hit that. You can hit these buttons all you want. You can even hit them both all you want, and it won't unless you hit and hold down for at least 1 second. So now, if you wanted to, you can add a sound effect to that says on and off, or receiver on and off if you happen to have those sound files. And the other thing that you can do is you can go over to model, and actually let's go to display and say, let's say I'm not using this bottom display for the first screen. Let me just go back there so I can show you. So right now this is the default setup. Let's say we're using timer 1, but we're not using this bottom one over here. So we can go over here and edit or configure widget, sorry. Okay, now we want value, and source would be a logic switch and the remote switch. So now we can see the status of the remote switch over here. Let's get out of that, and there it is. So remote switch right now is green, which means on, and that's the same thing, the receiver is on. Press the button, red, it is now off. So this is the easy way to do it. I actually do a Lua script that actually is called status widget. And a status widget has 2 conditions, and it could be green or red or whatever color you want and whatever text you want. So I replace that with a status widget. So I'll give you a link in the description. It's kind of nice. It looks great. It makes the entire area either green or red or whatever color that you want. And it says RX on because that's what you program in there, or RX off. So you can use the status widget as well to display the status of that. So, okay, remember that this device is sort of a mini receiver with very short range. And what happens is when it turns off this receiver, this is still on and drawing a very, very minuscule amount of power. And what you're doing is essentially using this as a mini receiver to turn on your main receiver. So this does draw a very small amount of current, in order for it to work and listen for the transmitter to give the on and the off signal. So in effect, this is a little mini receiver. If there is interference in the air or something does go wrong, the unit will fail safe on. If you notice, every once in a while, if you have a very dirty RF environment, you may notice that this will not turn off with the transmitter. And in that case, what happened was this went to failsafe and turn on the receiver, so that way it knows that everything is fine. Like if it happens to be in flight, it will failsafe on if there is a problem. So if you have problems turning off the receiver with the remote method, that may have happened, and you might have to power cycle the receiver to get it working again and get it out of failsafe mode. All right, guys, that's it. That's the NFC switch and the different methods to use it. If you have any questions or comments, you can comment in this video or email me at jose@freesky-rc.com. Thank you very much, guys, and have a good night.